back from atop the wall. My name is Mason Knopp, and we have another deck today. And this is a standard deck called All for One, Dimir Embodiment of Agonies. The name for this deck comes from a character from My Hero Academia with a quirk that is All for One. So he basically just gathers up tons of power, and I thought, oh man, just like having all of these cards that I'm like throwing away, just like building him up, it's like all of it's just for one. And I felt that was just perfect, and that was the name for the deck. That's right, our build around is the Embodiment of Agonies, a sweet demon creature in standard that I really wanted to build around with. This creature costs 1 black. It's a demon with flying and death touch and enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each different mana cost among non-land cards in your graveyard. So, for example, his mana cost is different from Playcrafter. They have different mana cost, and they will both count if they're in the graveyard for his ability. Now, some of the cards that are going to help us just strictly for milling would be the Stitcher Suppliers, a card that helps put more power on the board later than earlier by milling ourselves, both when it enters or when it dies. We got the 2 searches for Ascanta. If we get to flip it, it becomes a great card advantage engine, as well as milling us earlier in the early game by letting us surveil 1 at the beginning of our upkeep. We got Wand of Vertebrae, which gives just 1 mana, tap, mill ourselves a card. We can pay 2, tap, exile it, shuffle up to 5 cards from our graveyard back into our library. Next we have Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. He gives us the ability to mill ourselves for 2, draw a card, both giving us the ability to get card advantage and use him to pump up Embodiment of Agonies. Then we have Kesmina, another way to create a token that can let us loot, but also protects our creatures on the board and our planeswalkers by making all spells that target them cost 2 more. Next we have our cantrips. We have the 1 opt, and we have the 1 discovery dispersal to help us dig through our library, put some things in. The Narset Parter of Veils is there strictly for card advantage and to hate on our opponent's draw. It does help sometimes, but for the most part, it's just a really strong card in standard, and I felt that it needed to be included because it was just fairly important in the meta right now. And for our removal suite, we have our 2 negates to help fight non-creature spells like planeswalkers in the meta right now. We have Sinister Sabotage, an all-around counter spell that lets us dig. We have Price of Fame to hate on legendary creatures. There is a Legends deck that's going around, which is pretty sweet. Vraska's Contempt, a way to catch back up after our opponent has been gaining some momentum earlier in the game, slow them down. We have our Dispersal side of Discovery Dispersal. They return the highest converted mana cost permanent that they have to their hand, then discard a card. A lot of times we can catch up pretty quickly with this. Legion's End, really important for fighting a lot of the early game aggro decks, specifically Orzhov Vampires or Mono Red Weenies right now. We have the 4 Thought Erasures, probably one of the most powerful removal spells in standard right now. It's a Thought Seize that doesn't shock you and allows you to surveil. Very strong. Felt like it needed to be included in the deck. Full 4 of. The information is super relevant almost every single game. And with the information that we gain, we can better choose what we're going to loot away, what we're going to discard away, what we're going to surveil away. And this helps us prepare for the rest of the game and really choose and pick and choosing the best possible removal for the rest of the game. We have our Playcrafters to get rid of any kind of like Boggles type decks, creatures, or anything like that that are floating around. Pick off the indestructible creatures or the ones that regenerate, things that are just particularly out of our reach. You have to remove everything else around them. The remaining cards in the deck are, for the most part, value spells like Mission Briefing, which allows us to surveil 2, and then we get to choose an instant or a sorcery in our graveyard and get a second use out of them. So we get more negates, more ops, more Price of Fame, Sinister Sabotages, all this great stuff. Another Thought Erasure to help pick our opponent's hand apart. And we have 3 Tomebound Liches, which is really sweet. I really do like Tomebound Lich. He wasn't good enough to be a 4 of in the deck, but the life gain death touch part is sweet. Just having a Basilisk Collar on a 1/3 that also loots when it deals damage to a player helps support us, and it helps sometimes gain us a little bit of life, block for us really well, attack really well. And the mana base is fairly simple for the most part. It is 5 islands and 7 swamps, mostly because the primary 1-drops that we could have in the deck are mostly ones that we could cast with black mana, more so than opt on turn 1 with the islands. We have the 4 watery graves, 4 drowned catacombs, 2 dismal backwaters, which is a fantastic Pauper staple. If you don't play Pauper, you should really play Pauper. It is a far better format for people that like building decks and like keeping their cards around in the game for more than a year. And actually, my channel got its start doing mostly Pauper decks. So if you haven't seen any of those, you should really go to the rest of my channel and check that out. And I know how curious you could possibly be about the rest of my channel, and I mean, you might be agonizingly like curious about it. God, I know how tormented you must be about it. You should really check that out. And on to our sideboard. The things that we would be afraid of in Standard, not particularly anything 100% of the time, except for maybe wilderness reclamation decks that have Fate Reforged in them. So we have the 3 Unmoored Egos to just name Fate Reforged immediately, or name Wilderness Reclamation and immediately just get all of those out of their deck and slow them down a lot. We have to also fight through tokens. So with fighting the vampire decks and fighting the token decks and fighting the mono red decks, we have the Cry of the Carnarium, which to sweep away all of the small creatures. We have Vraska's Contempt to help us catch back up, gain some life, get rid of their biggest thing, their biggest threat. We also have just some Aether Gust to help fight against the red and the green decks, particularly more so green decks because they're playing the bigger spells that are easier to like put back on top and gain tempo advantage over. We have Ashiok, the Dream Render, to destroy graveyards and prevent people from searching. We have Entrancing Melody to nab any sweet creatures that we might see that are super powerful for our opponents and that might also be really good for us. Lazotep Plating is to protect our things from any kind of removal that they might side in. We have Negates to help fight through Planeswalkers, as particularly Esper Planeswalkers right now. There's a few different variations of it right now in the meta, and I don't like any of them. Noxious Grasp, mostly for Teferi. Let's be honest, it's mostly for Teferi. I wish that was Teferi. The Elder Spell for Teferi, blow up all the Teferis, big Teferi, little Teferi, add an set that's not ours, put a bunch of counters on RJs, draw 7 cards. Love it. And that is the deck. If you have any questions about the deck, or you like what you see and you'd like to see more, or there's anything that you would particularly like to see on this channel, let me know in the comments below. And don't be afraid to just look around for this deck on tappedout.net, where I post all of my decks as they come out, same day, same time that the videos come out usually. And there's always a bunch of cards that may be board for cards like maybe you didn't like this particular build of the deck, but you felt like maybe a faster version would be better. You can look around and you can find some of those cards that might actually have been things that I glazed over, things that you might think are better and deserve to be in the deck. Let me know your opinions in the comments below, or on Twitter, Facebook, and coming in for that face touch.